Somewhere. How do you have your phone?
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank all of you for coming here. It's Open Government Week, and in keeping with that important observation, I'm here to announce a change in the operations of my office. Currently, the auditor state obviously audits all of the state and local governments in Ohio. The public records issue is not a money issue per se. However, it's part of what we call our compliance supplement, which is areas that we think are important to the functioning of an open government that may not have direct financial consequences. Under current practice, my office, during the course of an annual audit of a local government, will look for statutory compliance on things such as, is there a public records policy? Is it posted? Is the mandatory training going on? What we don't do is actually look and see whether the public records are easily available to the public. Today, we're going to modify that procedure and hopefully promote an environment in local government that will be conducive to quick, responsive public records procedure. We are promulgating a recommended policy that every government maintain a log for open record requests that will include the date that the record was requested, the nature of the record, as well as, if provided, the contact information or name of the individual requestor, which of course is not required, although we do have to have a way to get the records to that individual if they're not waiting. The log would also include the date that the response was made and whether there's any redactions that were made under law or any documents that were perhaps responsive to the request but otherwise withheld for reasons of a statutory exception or a privilege claim of some sort. The policy will also include a recommendation that a privilege file be kept electronically or in paper that will maintain the unredacted documents for review to determine whether the privilege was appropriately claimed. Now, what we're going to do to make sure that this happens is we'll be taking a sample of local governments based on risk that will be representative of the entire state. We will try to rotate that from year to year to the extent feasible. And we will be looking to see whether the records, the log exists and whether the records have been turned over in a timely manner. For those instances in which it appears that it was unreasonable or that there was non-compliance with public records, we will be making note of that in our work papers and in the management letter or the report as seems appropriate. This represents a new mechanism. Currently, open records law is enforced, as I think all of you know, basically only through a lawsuit in common pleas court. The problem, of course, is that that can be kind of expensive and difficult to do. A newspaper or a TV station may have the resources to do that. It's a little tougher when Harry homeowner tries to do it, and if runs into a brick wall, there may not be the resources to be able to get to common pleas court. Finally, in addition to this being an important part of compliance for the proper operation of an open government, it also does have, and I will mention this in our advice to the local governments, there is an important financial component here. That is that the common pleas court, when there is a lawsuit, can order attorney fees to be paid by the government to the person bringing a successful lawsuit under certain circumstances. Those attorney those awards of attorney fees can range from a few to many thousands of dollars, and can be, in the case of a smaller government, and even a crippling cost. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Do you have any sense right now as to what proportion of these requests are granted, or what proportion are improperly withheld from the public? Any sense as to where we're at?
Well, other than the anecdotal evidence that has been published by newspapers or other news organizations, I don't really. My sense is that most governments try to run honestly and well, but we'll have an empirical sample to take a look at after we've completed these reviews.
How will you judge timeliness? Some, one government may say it takes us 2 weeks to produce this record, another may say for an identical request a matter of days. How do you plan to judge that aspect of it?
The same way a court would, or the same way you would, Joe. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot of variables that go into that, and that's why we don't have in law a hard and fast deadline. It's the nature of the document, it's the size of the request, it's the resources available to the local government. If it's a document that is easily accessible and already produced by the government, for example, I'd like to have January's payroll record, summary. That already exists. I would expect that to be produced in a day, or perhaps two, if there was necessity to take out Social Security numbers or something like that. On the other hand, a very voluminous request or something that involves, say, litigation, possible attorney-client privilege, it might not be unreasonable for that to take several weeks to produce. I think it depends on the circumstances, but our local government auditors are folks that know local government, and I think they're in a great position to be able to make those determinations. Let me also add that we're not going to be quibbling over close calls. If it's reasonable means something more than 5 minutes late on a deadline. It means that you didn't really try to do it. What we're focused on is the folks that really aren't placing a priority on this and not trying to honor the spirit of the law.
Dave, as far as requiring the local governments to maintain these logs, is that something you can direct them to do, or do you need some sort of authority from the legislature or other portion of state government to get that done?
We're going to define it as a best practice right now. Once we have some experience with taking a look at this and have an idea of how thorough and how widespread compliance is, we'll be able to evaluate whether a change in the law might be worth considering.
In a previous life, you were a news reporter. Does that play any role in why you're doing this?
Well, I guess I wouldn't be entirely candid if I didn't admit that my years as a newspaper reporter for the Old Citizen Journal informed my view on this. The fact of the matter is, if the records belong to the people or not available to the press, they've been, in essence, made secret. I think this is a bedrock principle of free and open government, and I'm pleased that we'll be able to help support that in a very small way.
So let's say you go in and you find out a local government or a state agency isn't turning over public records like they're supposed to be doing. What do you do?
Well, great question. And if it's a small thing in the sense that maybe it just takes longer than it should, or 5% of 100 requests weren't adequately produced, we probably would end up making a comment in the management letter the first time it happens. On the other hand, if we have what appears to be systemic stonewalling, I think that that's something that could end up being noted in the audit report itself, and I don't doubt that might end up being evidence in a court proceeding at some point in the future.
Have you identified the sampling of governments that will be in the first round?
We're going to do this on a basis of risk assessment. So, for example, a very small government that doesn't have a history of having any records requests, we're probably not going to spend a lot of time thinking about that area. Another thing that we're going to do to assist is we've established a toll-free number, 888-877-7760, for people to be able to notify us if they feel that they've had problems getting public records. Now, the public record, the call there is not going to enable us to be an ombudsman. We're not going to be able to resolve every possible complaint out there. What we will do is pass that information on to the management of that particular governmental entity so that they're aware perhaps it's a staff problem and we just need somebody a little higher up to make sure that it's being paid attention to. The other thing we're going to do is take a look at the dispersion of those calls, and if there's a particular entity that seems to get a lot of telephone calls to this line, they're probably going to be part of our sample. And finally, I will announce today, based on what I saw on the front page, or I don't know, is that front page? But anyway, what I saw on the Plain Dealer, Cleveland's going to be part of our first sample.
When you said that if you found systemic stonewalling, maybe that finding would be part of a lawsuit, can I assume you meant not a lawsuit by you, but a lawsuit again by the aggrieved parties, and then they would just say...
In the future, and they would use that as part of I presume, part of a piece of evidence to show that the entity was not acting in good faith.
Columbus, in that story, since you mentioned it, the city of Columbus had a pretty, compared to Cleveland especially, detailed plan and way to track records requests, where Cleveland really didn't have a system like that set up. Cincinnati also had some kind of system. What do you think about Cleveland not having something like that in place? It's one of the biggest cities in the state. And
well, let's be clear. They're not required to have that under the law or any relevant regulation. However, our office is going to be promulgating a bulletin that we believe is it's the best practice to have a system. And in fact, and I'll be candid, I inherited this from my predecessor, Mary Taylor, but we have a system to track exactly this kind of information in the auditor's office. And I'm encouraging Ohio entities, if you're a government entity, you ought to have some kind of a system going forward. I know that there's a lot of pressures out there. This doesn't have to be a really sophisticated, high-end, 2-year development piece of software. But at the very least, you ought to be able to get a spiral-bound notebook and write this stuff down as it comes in.
did you have a system for tracking this in the prosecutor's office in Delaware?
I had a records custodian, Tracy Whitaker, and I would ask you to ask her how she kept it. We didn't get that many requests that it was really something I paid a great deal of attention to.